All right, so let's talk about one of the biggest issues holding back this game's striking system, and it's actually one that doesn't get talked about often, and I am referring to the invisible wall that prevents fighters from colliding into each other. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm going to use this to demonstrate right here. So I've got Conor McGregor and I've got Nate Diaz. When you're afar from each other and you try to advance, there's a certain point you're going to get to and you can't advance any further. It's around here. Now, as you can see, I'm holding forward on my left stick and my fighter is no longer moving forward. So you can't actually collide into your opponent. You can't move into the other person because there's an invisible wall right there separating you, preventing you from doing that. Now, the reason why they're doing that is because they want to avoid all kinds of weird clipping issues. You know, if you're just moving into each other, it can cause some, weird clipping issues. You could go into each other, go through your opponent. There's a bunch of weird bugs that could probably come up with that. But because of this invisible wall, it actually does something. It takes away a very, very important skill that every single striker needs to have, and that is the skill of not stifling your own attacks. When you watch real-world MMA, whether it's MMA, boxing, kickboxing, or whatever, you're going to notice that occasionally fighters will collide into each other because the attacker overthrows and falls into his opponent, essentially stifling his own attacks. And this is actually something that boxers will take advantage of. When an opponent is being extremely aggressive, a lot of times they'll actually crash into the opponent, and as a way to stifle the opponent's attack and prevent them from maintaining that aggression. Meanwhile, in a game like UFC 5 and pretty much every other game that we've seen, every other combat game that we've seen, that skill is not required. You don't need, in these games, you don't need to learn how to not stifle your own attack. So even if I'm holding forward the whole entire time, the moment I get here, I can hold forward and just tee off on my opponent, right? I can just hold forward and throw combinations, and the game is never going to allow me to run into him. So I never have to manage that distance. Because right now, in terms of distance management, you only have to worry about managing your distance in one direction, and that is here, backing out. You know, you want to know when you're in range to get hit. You want to know when you're in range to hit your opponent. You kind of want to know when you're like from here, from this range right here. I know that if I try to hit you with a hook, it's going to whiff. I can't hit you with a hook, but I know I can hit you with a cross. See that? You can kind of learn these ranges the more you play the game. You can hit him with a cross. You can't really hit him with a hook from here. You can hit him with a leg kick, of course. But then the game solves the issue of crashing in for you, because it doesn't allow you to. The moment you get here, the game puts you in the perfect range. And so let's say you have your opponent close to the cage right here. You've pinned him against the cage. This is usually where we see fighters stifle their own attack. It requires a lot of skill to know the right range to stay in and tee off on your opponent, right? It requires a lot of skill. Okay, now I'm at the right range. I'm not going to go beyond this range, and I'm not going to go behind this range. I'm going to keep him at the end of my punches and just pepper him against the cage. And we see a lot of unskilled strikers wail in and freaking run into the other guy and stifle his own attack. But you never have to worry about that in the game, ever. And that makes aggression way more potent than it needs to be, because if this wasn't the case, a lot of players would be running into each other, it would be crashing in, a lot of clinching would be happening, and it would require more skill than it does right now to actually maintain forward aggression against your opponent. I talked about this in my blog, and I offered a few solutions, because every single time I brought this up, I've always got a pushback, and the pushback is, if we were to remove that wall and allow you to just run into each other, it will result in a lot of clipping issues. The game is essentially going to freaking break. There's going to be a lot of bugs, so we can't really risk it. It's just going to get fucking chaotic. So my solution to that is, I think we could do it with canned animations. And I wrote about this in my blog. Let's go take a look at it right now. I'm going to leave a link to this blog in the description below. This is a blog that I wrote a long time ago in 2021, discussing striking changes that I would like to see. I covered a lot of different things, and I think you guys will really enjoy reading this if you haven't looked at it. I covered blocking, I covered parries, I covered movement, I covered pretty much like every single aspect of it. But the one aspect that I want to pay attention to right here is where I said, number 6, where I said something better than the invisible wall separating fighters. It says, currently in the game, as well as every single fighting game I've played, there's an invisible wall designed to keep fighters from crashing directly into each other. Hopefully, the UFC does not freaking copyright this video, because I would like you guys to see what I mean. So look at what happened right here. Jan Blachowicz pushing forward aggressively crashes directly into Dominic Reyes, stifling his own attack, right? As soon as he threw that and crashed in, now he can't throw anymore. Now he's in the clinch, right? Show you guys a few more examples. I said a sequence like the above would never happen in UFC 4 because the game would constantly keep Jan at optimal range, regardless of how aggressive the player is being. My suggestion is allow for more natural contextual reactions when two fighters get too close to each other. Whether it's physics-based, ideal if done correctly, or preset animations or canned animations, this will make the fighters feel so much more natural. So what I mean by canned animations is they have to go in there and actually mocap different animations that will happen depending on what you're doing when you approach your opponent. And we see this all the time in boxing. And like boxing, if you want to figure out all the kinds of canned animations you can use, watch boxing matches. For example, a lot of times when we see two boxers in a regular peekaboo style block and they advance into each other, they do exactly what you see Canelo Alvarez and Triple G doing right here. They go head to head. They lean into each other head to head. And a lot of times they'll stay there. They stay head to head like that, and they'll work the body, they'll work the body, they'll work the head while staying super close head to head with their guard up. So we see that often. Another option we see is right there. Triple G throws a cross, right? Falls into Canelo Alvarez as he's trying to throw the left hook. He overshoots it. He falls into Canelo and they crash in. That prevents him from continuing that barrage. Let's just say there was an invisible wall right there. Triple G would have thrown that cross and ended in the perfect range to follow up with a left hand, right hand, and just follow up the combo. But because he overshot it, he fell directly into Canelo, stifling his own attack. And that is good. We need something like that in the game because it will force players to monitor that distance. Another option right there is shoulder to shoulder. See how they go shoulder to shoulder? That could be another canned animation depending on what you're doing, right? Right there we see Canelo Alvarez attempting to throw an uppercut at the same time that Triple G is ducking. So maybe every single time you're ducking into an opponent and he's throwing to where your shoulders line up and you're close to each other, you go shoulder to shoulder very briefly. That's how you crash in, and then you guys can back up. So like rather than letting physics control this, you use animations, contextual animations, depending on what you're doing, right? Then the animation will play and you guys can separate again. Another option, I says right here, brief over under clinch. This is Jose Aldo versus Chad Mendes. See how they crash in? Chad Mendes is trying to go in with a left hook, but again, he overshoots it. At the same time he's about to go in for the left hook, Jose Aldo is moving forward with his body. They crash in very briefly and separate. A very brief over under. There's no stickiness there. They just crash in, boom, and separate again. Another option could be right there, hand to hand. We see this all the time when two fighters are about to collide into each other. Sometimes someone like John Jones will do it on purpose, right, where he freaking reaches out and the opponent will reach out to him as well. But a lot of times we see it as you're about to either exit the cage or the opponent is about to throw. A lot of times fighters will reach out and just grab each other briefly and then separate. I said you could even expand it to include contextual scenarios that only plays out under very specific conditions. So I said, take Leon Edwards, for example. He has an incredible wealth of knowledge when it comes to the clinch. you could design a context-based system that forces his opponent to collide into his dominant over-under position where he gets strike priority, all right? A scenario that only plays when he slips to the outside of a cross while keeping his feet planted so the opponent whiffs and runs into him. So right here, I'm talking about how you could expand it and make it even more context-based. So what would happen if Leon Edwards is slipping to the outside with his feet planted and the opponent throws a cross over his shoulder? What would happen? Naturally, Leon Edwards will grab a hold of the clinch. So I'm here, I'm Leon Edwards. You throw a cross over me, you'd fall directly into me. What I'm most likely going to do as Edwards is I'm going to fucking grab you this way. And that's exactly what he did against Gunnar Nelson right there. Gunnar Nelson throws a cross, overextends, falls directly into Leon Edwards. Leon grabs a hold of the shoulder, boom, shoulder, collar tie right away. And from there, he gets strike priority. He gets to throw first. And so he goes with the elbow. So I'm asking for stuff like this. And of course, it's going to require a lot of research. It'll require you looking at so many matches. Study what happens when fighters are colliding into each other. What are the different scenarios that we can come up with? And then you go in and you do motion capture. And you get all these contextual transitions. I says, or you could just allow it for all fighters. So I'm saying you could make it fighter specific if you want to do like some kind of fighter uniqueness thing where only certain fighters will be able to get access to certain contextual crash ins, or you could just allow for every single fighter. I don't care. All I know is that it would add so much to the striking system, because right there I said this would add far more skill to pressure fighting. Pressure fighters will learn that overextending means they'll constantly stifle their own offense and run into their opponent repeatedly, which in turn will force them to try to keep the opponent at the end of their punches with well-placed shots as opposed to constantly throwing forward-moving combinations. I said I expect a bit of pushback on this idea, and I am eager to debate you guys on it. That still stands. If you have any concerns with this, if you have any ideas that could improve this idea, let me know. So if you guys want to talk about it, if you don't like it for whatever reason, I'm open to it. This is something that I've been thinking about for years. It's been a long, long time. Because, man, every single complaint that, we get with, pressure fighting, no one ever addresses this right here. And this is a huge, huge issue that allows players to pressure ad infinitum. Everyone's always talking about stamina, buffing the block, all of these things. It's not gonna, until this is not fixed, until this is fixed, whatever else you do to try to deal with pressure fighting, you won't quite deal with it until you make this a requirement, a skill that players need to have. You gotta be able to stop yourself from crashing in. And crashing into opponents has to be a legitimate skill that you use to deal with pressure. If you guys go back and you watch John Bones Jones versus Alexander Gustafsson, their second fight, you'll notice that John added that skill. He added that tactic to his repertoire in that second fight. He wasn't doing it in the first fight. Every time Gustafsson will advance forward with combinations, John Jones will back away like this. He'll back up, and Gus will just combo him as he's backing up. What John did in the second fight was, okay, every time I go to back up, this dude just follows me with combos. So why don't I just go into him when he's trying to attack me with combos? Rather than backing up like this and just having him tee off on me, I'm going to fall directly into him. And when I fall into him, boom, now his attack is gone. Now we're in the clinch. Now we're in my world. It's where I want to be anyways. So every time Gus will try to enter the pocket, John Jones will crash in. Or when John will overthrow and it's like, oh shit, Gus is about to counter me, boom, he crashes in. And we see Floyd Mayweather do this all the time in every single one of his fight. We see Mike Tyson. If you go back and you watch Tyson's matches, there's a lot of crashing in going on because of how much he freaking lunges himself into opponents. So I know I've talked quite a bit about this right now, So I'm gonna leave it at that. I'm gonna let this topic breathe. All right. I would love to see this. It's most likely not going to happen in UFC 5. And it's pretty obvious it won't happen for UFC 5. But if there's going to be a next game, I would really like to see EA pay attention to this. Again, canned animations. If you can't do it physics-based, if it's going to be too chaotic and everything will break, then go with preset canned animations. Do your research. If you need my help with it, I am 100% available to help. I've already done a lot of this research. I've already identified a bunch of different scenarios and a bunch of different animations you guys can go with. I can find even more. All right, just let me know, and I got you. So I'm gonna leave it at that. Thank you for watching. If you guys want to check out this blog, like I said, I will leave a link to it in the description below. A few of you guys have already actually looked at this blog right here. Look at that. A few of you guys have already checked the blog out. As you can see, some of these comments that you guys have already left. So I'll leave a link below. I'm telling you guys, it is well written. It is well researched. I put a lot of fucking effort and thought into this. I think you're going to appreciate a lot of what I put in there. So definitely check it out. I will leave a link to it in the description below. And yeah, you guys give me your thoughts. Let me know what you think about it. And I will see you boys later. As always, thank you so much for watching. Peace out. Have a good one.